Well, welcome to this special edition of North Carolina Bookwatch. We're taping here at Carolina Meadows, south of Chapel Hill, and talking to some of the authors in this vibrant community, including my good friend from way back. Walter Dellinger. And Walter is known to us in many ways, first of all, as a great lawyer, as a great law teacher, and as a public servant, putting his legal skills to work for us as a formerly Assistant Attorney General. Walter, you're a North Carolina native, but the Washington Post, when they published your article called Reading James Baldwin on a Segregated Southern Construction Site, listed you as a Washington lawyer.
Well, I still am.
How do you manage that?
It's with some back and forth and a good van service.
Should I buy stock in the airlines?
No, all ground transportation only. I have a good van guy named Sam Miller, so he takes care of that.
Well, in the February 24th edition of the Washington Post, there was an article by you about reading James Baldwin on a Southern construction site, set at a time when you were 15 or 16 years old, working. Why'd you feel like you needed to write that now? Well,
it's an outtake of something I'm working on as part of a book. And the first part of the book is probably going to be called Balcony Reserved for White Spectators.
Say that again.
Balcony Reserved for White Spectators.
For white spectators.
For white spectators.
For those of us our age, that rings kind of funny.
Well, then you didn't listen to the right radio stations growing
up. I listened to WGIV.
You listened to WGIV. Well,
this is a station in Charlotte.
In Charlotte. Dances that were for African Americans had a balcony reserved for white spectators. So it's sort of both literal and metaphorical, the notion that I was only a spectator from the balcony on what was happening with race in the South.
Watching what was happening in the black community, right. And what were you thinking?
From a distance, that's the sense. But the Baldwin piece came about because the documentary about James Baldwin was up for an Academy Award last Sunday. So I thought I would take that piece out of what I was writing and do it on the occasion of the Academy Awards. It arose because of I think there's been no more dramatic piece of reading that I've done in my life than reading Baldwin. He was a gay black intellectual and essayist in Harlem and Paris, probably the leading essayist of his day. I was a low-income white kid living in the South, working construction to save money for college, and somehow...
How did that come about that you were reading him, and what did it have to do with the construction?
Baldwin may have gone back to listening to WGIV on the radio because that was what was called a black-oriented station in the South in the 50s, and I listened to the Gospel Hour faithfully. They had a contest to see who could first identify a gospel song, and I immediately, from the first three bars, knew it was Right On King.
You as a little white kid knew it before any of the African American.
I knew it was Right On King Jesus by the Soul Stirrers right off the bat. And the prize was a one-year subscription to Ebony magazine, which in the segregated South was a whole different world, particularly the advertisements, where no people of color were ever in mainstream media advertisements at all. And yet all the advertisements were like that. And it was probably, the year I got that subscription was the year that Baldwin wrote the second of his two books, Nobody Knows My Name and Notes of a Native Son.
But you started reading his articles in Ebony, or did it just coincide?
I read about him in Ebony, but by the time Nobody Knows My Name came out is the summer I was working construction.
Tell us about the composition of that construction crew and what roles white and black laborers played.
Well, it was on this work site, only whites could be carpenters, and the black men were all laborers, paid $1 an hour. As I was a temporary kid, I was assigned as a laborer. I was like the token white laborer on this crew. What was interesting and dramatic for me was that the best carpenter by far was one of the African-American men who was a laborer.
He's getting paid as a laborer.
He got paid as a laborer no matter what he was doing. So whenever there was a very difficult challenge to the carpentry, the on-site supervisor would ask David to take on the challenge. But if anybody from company headquarters arrived on the scene, I was sometimes a lookout, David had to put down his carpentry tools and pick up a broom or a shovel.
He couldn't be caught being an expert.
Even paid as a laborer, he couldn't be caught breaking the rigid rules. That gives you a sense of how rigid the
What kind of impact, did this have any effect on your future life?
Well, I think it did in ways difficult to measure. By that time, I was heading off to Chapel Hill, to the State University, and I don't know if there was a connection between that experience and finding myself on the picket line at the Varsity Theater on Wednesday nights of the segregated movie theaters. I was the Southern White undergraduate on the steering committee formed at what is now the AME Zion Church, and Chapel Hill was then too. So that was, reading Baldwin was really an extraordinary experience. I mean, he talks about how his first trip south was to Charlotte. And it was quite revelatory.
What do you think of Charlotte?
It was, well, he said when the black ministers put him on the plane to head further south, they warned him. They said, now, you've been to Charlotte, but Charlotte is not really the South. And I thought, well, that's nice. And I turned the page, and Baldwin writes, Charlotte, by God, was Southern enough for me. He said, the white people I talked to say that race relations are quite good in Charlotte. I have yet to meet a Negro who shares that opinion, quote unquote. That was,
oh my golly, I wish we could talk some more. And is this going to be part of your book?
Yeah, the book is a collection of essays in which each chapter will be some of my experiences either growing up or in government, but every chapter will also have substantive constitutional analysis in it. So the race chapter will lead into a discussion of where the Supreme Court is on race today. The religion chapter about being a Catholic kid that leaves the classroom in North Carolina, and where the court is on religion today. So that's the nature of the work.
I can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Thank you.